All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're building something pretty profound together. When we think of George Washington, we almost always picture him as a general crossing the Delaware, or, as our first president. We definitely don't picture a young guy meticulously copying down a strict set of behavioral rules. But those rules of civility weren't just dusty historical footnotes or old-fashioned manners. As we're going to explore today, they actually form a timeless moral architecture. It's literally a blueprint for self-mastery and daily discipline, and honestly, it's just as applicable in our modern digital workspaces as it was centuries ago.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the blueprint we'll be following today. An apprentice of character, shaping the rough ashlar, governing the tongue, order and physical presence, restraint under pressure, and finally, the guidance of conscience.
Starting off with Section 1, an apprentice of character.
So, how does a man appear in the world? I want to pose this directly to you. Our source material really challenges us here to realize that true character, it isn't about what we know in theory. It's not about the books we've read or the high-minded ideals we slap on our social media profiles. It is entirely about conduct. It's about how we actually embody those principles in reality, right out there in front of everyone.
As the sources reveal, before Washington could lead a nation, he had to be an apprentice of character. His rules of civility were strict daily disciplines. They were designed to teach a young man exactly how to govern himself, his tongue, his passions, his respect for others, long before he could ever hope to govern anyone else. You've kind of got to become governable first, right?
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 2, Shaping the Rough Ashlar.
Now, our sources pull in this brilliant concept of self-mastery from Masonic traditions to help guide our daily behavior, specifically using the metaphor of the rough ashlar. The rough ashlar is simply an unshaped stone. But here's the absolute key takeaway. You don't refine this stone by, say, meditating alone on a mountain for a decade in perfect peace. Nope. You refine it through the friction of society. Civility acts as the chisel that shapes us when we're dealing with difficult coworkers, stressful commutes, or super demanding clients.
And this brilliantly illustrates the stark difference between our internal intentions and our external reality. We so often think of our internal work, personal reflections, the stuff hidden from view, as our true character. But the visible test of that refinement is the external form, how we act among others. Think about it. When you're insulted, do you respond with restraint? When you're totally ignored in a meeting, do you maintain your dignity? Or do you descend into pettiness? That friction is exactly what proves the structural integrity of your internal temple.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, governing the tongue. Let's look at the immense difference between a careless word and a measured word. A careless word humiliates, it divides, and it corrupts trust. But a measured word, that reconciles, elevates, and restores harmony. Let's adapt this into a modern etiquette checklist, right? Think about how to handle digital disagreements with restraint. When you get one of those incredibly frustrating emails, the careless word is the immediate, angry, caps lock reply all sent in a total blind rage. We've all been tempted. But the measured word is drafting that response, sitting on it for an hour, and then editing it down to deliver the truth with respect, not malice. It isn't staying silent out of fear. It's exercising restraint out of pure discipline.
The rule here is simple but tough. Speak little, but speak with purpose. Refusing to spread office rumors, avoiding unnecessary snappy wit, and never interrupting someone else. Those are absolutely incredible signs of intellectual restraint. Wisdom, as our source notes, is very often silent.
Moving on to Section 4, order in physical presence.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how these centuries-old rules map so perfectly onto modern office environments, like do not distort your face. Think about your real-time reactions on a virtual meeting when a colleague says something you strongly disagree with. Honestly, rolling your eyes on a webcam is a total failure of discipline. Or avoid restless motion and unnecessary noise. In today's terms, this literally means keeping yourself on mute when you aren't speaking, so the whole team doesn't hear you crunching on chips. It's not maintaining a professional presence rather than slouching or, spinning around in your desk chair. See, these aren't just empty gestures. As the source material emphasizes, a disordered man cannot build a structured life. A careless presence reveals a careless mind. How you dress for that virtual call, how you sit, how you enter a room, these are actually really powerful signals of your internal order being broadcast to everyone around you.
Next up is Section 5, Restraint Under Pressure.
Here we've got a great procedural checklist for high-pressure interactions. Whether you're dealing with a supervisor or a notoriously difficult client, the guidance is fast and it's clear.
stand when addressed, receive correction with humility, answer briefly and respectfully. Having humility before rank, or even just in the face of intense friction, well, that isn't submission. It's actually maintaining order. So the crucial point here is this realization. Civility is controlled strength. In our modern world, we kind of have a tendency to mistake civility for weakness, but the sources remind us that it is so easy to be crude, loud, and reactive. True power, true strength is remaining composed. It's the ultimate display of a person who is ruled by principle, rather than just being yanked around by impulse.
Let's use a totally relatable scenario to compare that reactive impulse versus measured discipline. Imagine a coworker takes total credit for your idea in a high-stakes meeting. The reactive impulse, that's to loudly interrupt, surrender your reason to passion, and basically cause a massive public scene right there at the conference table. But the measured discipline is remaining completely composed under pressure, respectfully addressing the disagreement later in private, and giving correction with gentleness. Respect is mandatory for sure, even when you're dealing with the disagreeable, because how we treat them is the true measure of our own character.
And finally, Section 6, the guidance of conscience.
The text referred to this beautifully as the celestial fire. This is that vital spark of conscience within everyone that must be constantly refined to govern all our works. It's this profound internal fire that ensures our reason always governs our passion, keeping us from being totally hijacked by our fleeting, immediate emotions.
To summarize this daily work, the temple of our character isn't built in massive moments of grandeur. No, it's built in these quiet, daily habits. It's choosing to listen instead of interrupting on a conference call. It's choosing to restrain yourself instead of reacting to a nasty email. And it's choosing to respect instead of ridiculing someone who just made a mistake.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought, derived straight from our sources today. When you finally log off, when you step away from the screen and return to the physical world, will people know your principles by the words you speak or by the conduct you demonstrate? Take a really hard look at your own daily habits and ask yourself what they are currently broadcasting to the world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.